So it's Memorial Day, which is probably a day that is quite hard for any veteran that you know, due to the forever war on terror, 20 years war, whatever you want to call it. Most of us have lost somebody at war, and most of us certainly have lost somebody to the other kind of battle that takes soldiers from us. One of those is my brother, who we lost last December. This is his ACU jacket that my mom just brought me. Memorial Day has been extra hard for me because it is my birthday weekend, and it is also the exact weekend that I lost a bunch of my soldiers on my first deployment. I'm Daniella, scholar of cults, extreme groups, and extremely bad leadership, former Captain Mestenek in the U.S. Army, deployed to Afghanistan twice. This is a chapter that I have written in my book about what we went through over there. It's called A Day Memorialized. I couldn't run fast enough. I tried to focus on putting one foot in front of the other, but my mind traveled faster than my leaden legs. I watched Captain Carmel's red bun bob up and down as she led me and our other female engagement team members to the Pale Horse Tactical Operations Center from the classroom, our lessons abandoned. Just minutes ago, she had received the text message that changed everything. 6 Pathfinders dead. Come now. I didn't want to think about who it was, what it was, why it was, but the tears began to spill from my eyes anyway. With the cadence of each footfall, I saw my guys. Mills, Patton, McGregor, the rest of the baby Rangers. John, the lieutenant who leads this team, who's my friend. The Tactical Operations Center was pure bedlam. Captain Carmel broke away from us and demanded to know which helicopter she should fly. Those are my guys. I'm going up, she shouted. I felt like she did, wanting to do something, and saw the same looks on the faces of the other women. But unlike Captain Carmel, we couldn't pull rank. The rest of us didn't fly helicopters. We were all just support. Instead, we stood together, forgotten in a corner, listening to the radio chatter dominated by the sounds of our friends dying. There are fragments where my memories should be static, flashes, images seared into my brain. There are the sounds I heard over the radio, and there are the scenes of what came after. But I don't know where my own memories stop, where they crash firsthand into accounts of survivors who were out on the sand that day, where they tangle with the words that were written about it later. Did I hear the battalion commander shouting his panic from a routine mission gone so fatally wrong? Get me a damn leader on the line! Did the room crackle with the response of the private first class who came on the radio when the bombs seemed to have stopped going off? Sir, I'm it. Did I hear the horrible silence that follows a massive blast? I dropped to my knees, and I wasn't the only one, silently praying to every deity I didn't believe in. Don't let it be my friends. Please don't let it be my guys. It would be hours before they would tell us the names officially. The first wave of guilt swept over me as people turned into numbers, a fatality count. 6 dead, 8 dead, 9, 10 humans gone. They were all our guys. If they weren't my friends, they would be someone else's friends. The husbands, brothers, sons, fathers, and teenagers who should have had their whole lives ahead of them. Finally, all non-essential personnel were cleared from the room, and I ran alone the 4 miles back to the Brigade Tactical Operations Center, the higher command where I worked. I dragged my feet, sobbing in the dust, not caring who saw or what they would think. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what a man could do to me. I didn't care. When I entered my office, my face red, Captain Madison shot out of his chair. Throwing all formality to the side, he pulled me into a hug and said, "I'm so glad you weren't there, that none of you girls were there with them today." I wanted to punch him in the face, along with everyone who kept repeating the same sentiment. All I could think over and over to myself, like a chant or a prayer, was there wasn't a single thing that made my life worth a cent more than any of theirs. I sat at my desk, watching the clock move, the second hand somehow slower with each moment. I stared at the screens transmitting important information, but I couldn't make my eyes focus enough to read them. Even as I told myself I'd never leave those monitors again. That as an intelligence officer, this was my fault. That I should have known what was going to happen. I failed them. I should have protected my guys. Captain Jillian Rodriguez approached me, speaking woman to woman for the first time in our turbulent relationship. Daniella, she said, there's nothing you can do for them here. The names will come out soon. Why don't you go back to housing? Be with the rest of your female engagement team girls. I could see the understanding in her eyes. She knew I needed sisters in arms at that moment, that this grief would be too much to handle alone. I ran every step, but hurrying did not make the news come faster. It was almost midnight when Captain Carmel arrived. The broken way she walked told me it was going to be as bad as I had imagined. But nothing prepared me for the way that each name would feel like a punch straight to the face, or how none of us had any tears left to cry. Instead, we stood holding hands, sisters in arms, as she listed off the names by heart. Sergeant Luis Ramos Velasquez, the Puerto Rican jokester who always teased me about my Mexicanista Spanish. He was our medic. I would later learn the homemade bomb that took his life flung his first responder kit toward the team, as if he was trying to take care of his men, even after he was gone. Staff Sergeant Ergen Osman. The guys used Velasquez's kit to sustain Sergeant First Class Osman. Oh, I put Staff Sergeant there. Oh, no. It was Sergeant First Class. The guys used Sergeant Velasquez's kit to sustain Sergeant First Class Osman long enough to make it onto the medical evacuation helicopter, but he couldn't be saved. Osman had just come in from a sister base to replace Sergeant Z for a few weeks. He was always trying to convince the baby Rangers to go to college when they got back stateside, warning them they wouldn't want to be still doing this ground-pounding shit as an old man, like me, with 2 little boys. Staff Sergeant Edward Mills. I don't know why, but I kept picturing Staff Sergeant Mills' chew can. I know he would have had one on him. Was it ever recovered, or was it obliterated by the blast that took his life? Sergeant Thomas Bohall. Sergeant Blowhard, my brother in the desert. The first guy I raced when I joined the team, when I was so desperately needed to prove I belonged. Quiet, sweet, thoughtful, gone. Specialist Adam Patton. Before he died, Specialist Patton waved at his best friend, Specialist McGregor, who was part of the rescue team coming over the sand hill toward him. As he waited to be rescued from the trap of radio-controlled IEDs laced throughout the sand all around him, Specialist Patton lay down in the prone position behind his rifle, squarely on top of a hidden bomb. First Lieutenant John Runkle. As I heard John's name, I finally exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath and my hope. I'd known deep down that he couldn't have lived through that explosion I'd heard. But the confirmation was final. There was no going back. He was gone. I didn't hear John's final radio call. He had squatted down beside Patton, calmly talking to the helicopter rescue mission overhead, relaying the information his battalion commander needed. A leader beside his men until the very end. There were 4 others I would learn later, both of the Air Force explosive ordnance technicians who'd been on the mission, killed doing their job as the first to respond to suspected bombs. 2 of the partnered Afghan soldiers. Others on our team had been badly wounded and were evacuated to Germany, then sent home to recover. Half our team was gone. My friends hugged and rocked each other, sitting on the stairs outside our rooms for hours. As morning broke, we agreed to the pretense of going our separate ways, knowing that sleep would elude us. I hoped Tiffany would be in our room, that maybe she'd come back early from her shift, but it was empty. I sat at my laptop and opened Facebook, hoping I'd get some salve of normalcy before the communications blackout that followed most fatalities. The little red notifications caught my eye. Birthday messages had continued to roll in from the day before, the States 12 hours behind us. Nestled among them was John's message, the one he'd written as he went to bed the day before, after prepping his gear and his guys for the next day's early mission. Happy birthday, Daniella. Sorry, I couldn't be there. The sun wouldn't stop shining for just one damn minute to let us mourn in peace. Back home, it was Memorial Day weekend. On Kandahar Airfield, we stood, lined perfectly in rows, shoulder to shoulder, heads bowed and tears falling. The Pathfinder ambush had been the highest casualty-producing event, 10 dead and many more wounded, in all the previous 3 years of war since the 2009 troop surge in Afghanistan. Everyone at Kandahar Airfield who could get the time off had shown up for the memorial service and to honor the heroes, the official Army term for those killed in action. Those of us with a personal connection to the deceased stood together in the front row, trying not to break rank and grab onto each other for support. Over the previous few days, I thought I'd cried myself dry. Squinting against the bright sunlight, I tried to hold it together as the words washed over me. The words we always say over the coffins of dead soldiers. They are heroes. They died for what they believed in. We are fighting for justice and freedom. We are on the right side of history. It wasn't that I believed the words were wrong. Not exactly. It was just that, as I stood there, I could almost picture an invisible line cleaving my brain in two. On one side, there was the American patriot, the woman literally fighting for her country in a war zone, the one who believed the promise of America and American freedoms, the woman who joyfully paid her taxes, because that's the price of American comfort. I loved America, the American dream, all of it. It's what I'd been striving for my entire life. But on the other side stood Daniella, the little cult girl who vividly remembered deaths being explained away as part of a bigger plan in God's army. There was the teen who felt the horror of 9/11 and the disconnect between what she saw with her own eyes and the empty platitudes of every authority figure in her life who said things were all right. That girl knew somebody had to be lying. I had the intelligence officer perspective behind me this time, too. I knew what happened in the aftermath of that fatal day, what always happened in the aftermath. The Pathfinders, Rangers, and other special related groups had been given the day off missions to cool down, to grieve, to rage. And then they'd been unleashed. I'd seen the pictures of what happened afterward, had stared at every single dark-skinned man lying on the ground, faces blown half open, teeth scattered around heads. I knew what nobody dared to say out loud. It had been an ambush. We had no proof any of these dead guys had anything to do with our dead guys. But man, hadn't it felt good to get some revenge on someone, anyone. They were all the same, weren't they? All bad guys, the enemy, the other, the reason our friends were gone, the end that justifies the means. At that moment, tears falling for my brothers, I thought about what other funerals might be going on at the same moment somewhere in the sands. Afghan Muslims will not allow a body to lie for more than 24 hours without burial, even the bodies of known terrorists. Even the corpses of those who have threatened and killed their own children. If we had gotten the right bad guys, the ones who'd watched our missions and learned the patterns, who'd set the bombs and booby traps, who'd hidden somewhere nearby with radio-controlled trigger and waited until Specialist Patton had lain down right there, John prone beside him. What was being said at their funerals? Wasn't it possible, even likely, that it was the same kinds of things, the same grief, the same vows for revenge, the same belief in the rightness of their cause? The booms of the 21-gun salute silenced my thoughts. The terrible, soul-marking, death-signifying finality of each shot. As I rocked backward with each deafening burst, 3 separate volleys of 7, perfectly timed shots, I realized I was openly sobbing, snot running down my face, shoulders shaking in a rhythm all their own, alongside the sickeningly sweet keening of the TAPS bugle call. I locked my hands to my sides at the position of attention, determined to give my men this final respect, no matter what it cost me. As the rituals of the ceremony concluded, I felt a sense of peace against all odds. They were on their way home now, to their final resting place, where there would be no more war. Sergeant First Class Z, our platoon sergeant, who'd been home on R&R when it all happened, told me he had threatened, cajoled, and begged his way onto the military transports that got him back to Kandahar in time for the ramp ceremony, the culmination of the memorial service when the 8 coffins were loaded onto the aircraft. I was at home preparing a Memorial Weekend barbecue with my family and friends that I hadn't seen in forever, when I got the worst visit you can ever. He paused, swelling hard, crying without any sign of shame. Ever imagine. I never wanted to go on leave. A platoon sergeant should never be forced to leave his guys, he choked out. I broke protocol to lay a hand over his, looking around briefly to make sure nobody was watching to misinterpret my gesture. We nodded at each other, a promise to one day say the unspoken words we couldn't yet. As we walked back to the unit headquarters, groups of officers and enlisted walking together, rank less important than ever, Captain Mike Madison approached me from behind. I flinched as his large hands landed on my shoulder. Daniella, I overheard some of the senior staff talking. People are asking a lot of questions about why you are taking this so hard. Mike, I said, my voice lowered as I used his first name. 10 humans are gone. Forever. For nothing. From my team. And people are asking why I'm upset? Do you get how fucked up that is? I knew I could be in serious trouble for addressing a senior officer in that way, for letting my anger show through, for criticizing the actions of the American Army. But I didn't care. I refused this time to put my head down, to show respect to an uncle, without question, the way I had in the past. Daniella, he said, his voice soft, I know what they meant to you. I know that was your team. I know you cared. I've lost friends too. His sentiments didn't stop him from issuing another warning. But you need to be careful. I'd hate to see a promising career destroyed by rumors of an inappropriate relationship. He finished, without a hint of irony in his voice. I was done with him. Thank you, Mike, I said through gritted teeth. Of all the things he could say at that moment, of all the times, of all the people. My fury turned to numbness. I knew it was the only way to survive. You're right, sir, I said. I'll be careful.